Hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of SBTDT. Today we're going to talk about the most common question that I get from all my friends and everybody that sees me going to the track. What is the best bike to go on the track? It's a legit question. It's obvious that everybody's going to ask you that, but it's really hard to answer this question, especially because you could offend someone, because everyone is passionate for one brand, but the reality of the answer is quite different than most of you probably expect. So first of all, let's talk about what bike to use to go for the first time on the track. A lot of people like to bring their own street bike to the track, and that's perfectly fair. More than likely you're going to be going with a crutch rocket, or to call it with its proper name, it's going to be called a SuperBike. But I've seen people coming even with the super motards, with naked bikes, or even with cruising bike. That was weird. One time I had this guy with the V6 Goldwing going around the track. It was like having to pass a bus while you're going on a racetrack. Yeah, not a fan of that. Definitely you don't do any performance lap. And the same is for the motards, really. Motards, I'm not happy when they're on the track. They do a completely different line rather than super bikes or naked bikes. Naked bikes, basically they're super bikes without the bodywork, so they can work. So to go on the track the first time, yeah, you can go with your bike, definitely you're more familiar with it, but you're gonna get to the point that you will want to buy a bike to just use on the track. So what would the great track bike be? Well, if you really want to learn, the best thing to do is to find a bike that gives you the least amount of multitasking, and you need to think the least possible so you can concentrate on riding properly. Not that easy. There are a lot of options. Personally, when I started to go on the track, my first track bike was a Suzuki SV650. I don't think it's the best bike. To me, it's been a great learning bike. It was very easy to ride. It's very forgiving if you make a mistake. It's not that powerful, so while I'm on a turn, I'm not thinking too much, oh my god, I have to open little the throttle. No, you can give a little more, and when you give too much, you find it out in a sweet way. It's not that it spits you off in the air. So that was my bike, my first bike. It was a V-twin. I have the preference of riding a 2-cylinder bike rather than a 4-cylinders. But that's just a preference and really a matter of getting used to opening and closing the throttle. With the V-twin bike, you have a lot of low-end torque. You're going to have a lot of push coming out of the corner, but you don't have the top-end speed that a 4-cylinder bike has. But really, the real difference between the motorcycles is another one. And that's the one that goes back to all the jokes that you hear. Oh, you have a Japanese bike or an Italian bike? You have a Japanese, I have the Italian. No, that's not true. The difference is actually caused by the type of frame. You see, all the Japanese bikes, and actually now even Germany, since BMW entered in this superbike world, they all use a frame which is called aluminum twin spar. It's also known as Delta box. Delta box is a type of frame that is basically two aluminum tubes that they just start from the triple clamp. They come down, they embrace like this the motor, which the motor sits on the bottom part of the frame, and then it creates a part that connects to the swing arm. This causes that you have a single block of aluminum that basically connects your triple clamp to your swing arm. It's a very flexible bike, it's a very flexible frame. It's aluminum is flexible, it connects the front wheel to the rear wheel directly, so definitely it's gonna flex. And a lot of riders, they do like that. They like to have a flexible bike. And if you think about Valentino Rossi, the super world champion of the world class MotoGP, he won several championships with a very flexible bike. Then 2 years ago he went to Ducati. Ducati historically makes a very rigid frame, and he didn't like it. He kept asking to have a flexible frame. He didn't like the rigid frame. It's really a matter of how our body moves on the bike. That's what causes it. But to understand better what's going on between the two frames, it's good to do a little bit of history, because that's what caused this ramification between Japanese bikes and Italian bikes. Although it's not true, because even in Italy we have Aprilia that does aluminum frame bike with the twin spar. Back in the days, all the motorcycles, they used to be made with steel trelli. They were just a lot of little steel tubes that they were going all around the motor, embracing it like a big old cage, holding the bike. And that the only way to reduce the weight on these kind of frames with the years was to remove excess material. They found out with the time, that they could remove a piece of material here, a piece there, and every once in a while the weight was being reduced. The first inventor of the aluminum frame was actually an Italian brand, was Bimota, that had this idea of making the twin spar frame with just two aluminum tubes that they embrace the motor and connect everything. And this has been a philosophy that was really appreciated by the Japanese manufacturers, which they all started using it. It's much cheaper to do, and it's effective. I mean, you have to sacrifice the rigidity. Aluminum is very flexible, but they figured out that people could get used to the new ride style. Whereas Ducati, Cagiva, MV Agosta, and afterwards even Bimota itself, which was the one that invented the aluminum frame, she went back to the steel trelli. And they kept just removing and removing the material, where now the latest steel trellis that you see, they're really not real frames anymore. It's a partial frame. They just connect the triple clamp to the top part of the motor, and the motor is hanging down on the bottom, and then on the motor they attach the swing arm, so the motor becomes part of the bike, part that sustains the bike itself. So it's really a different philosophy. If you look at the latest Ducatis, you go on the Ducati 848, really the steel trelli was just going from the triple clamp to the top part of the motor, then it was stopping because you had a separate piece that was just sitting on top of the motor to sit the rider, and the swing arm that was pivoted directly into the crankcase. Now the latest Ducati that they made, the 1199, doesn't have a frame anymore. The motor is directly holding the triple clamp, the rider is sitting on the top of the motor, the swing arm is attached to the motor. That's a very, very rigid bike, no flex at all. So Ducati decided to stick with making rigid bikes. But what is the difference between riding a flexible rather than a rigid bike? There is a lot of difference actually, and that's what causes really a rider to find himself comfortable or not comfortable on a certain bike. Me personally, I like rigid bikes. Probably many of you saw my videos. I ride the Ducatis. I have a Ducati 848, steel trelli, partial. I have only a piece of frame that connects the triple clamp to the motor, and then the rest is basically the motor. The motor holds the swing arm, so it's very, very rigid. The advantage is that when I go down on the corner, I can just put my bike down and the bike stays on that line. It just sticks to it. It doesn't move off of it. I can just push as hard as I want. The bike sticks there. I can lean down. It makes you feel like there is no limit. It's like if the bike is stuck on a rail, and I really like the sensation. I can go down, touch with my knee, with my boot. Some people say that I'm this far to touch my elbow too. I go really down, and I can carry a crazy speed, with my Ducati compared to the Japanese guys. The disadvantage of the steel frame, the non-flexible frame, is that basically you cannot change the line. Like I said before, it's like if the bike is stuck on a rail. I am down, I need to pass the guy that is in front of me, not gonna happen. I cannot pull the bike up and down again, I cannot go on the inside. Steel frames, they don't like that. They're not forgiving at all. The steel trelli, it's a rigid frame, you set it where it's set, and you better do it good. You cannot change your mind because it's gonna hurt you. So if I want to pass somebody, generally I have to set up the pass before I initiate the turn, because once you're down, you're there. Another thing of the steel trellis frame is the fact that they tend to pull themselves up and go straight, meaning that when I have to go on a turn with my Ducati, I really have to pull my bike down strongly, come down with me, I have to throw it down, slam it, stay here, I have to hold it there, and then when I'm at the end of the turn, just by opening the throttle, she just pulls me up with all my weight and everything, we just go back up. Well, I tried several bikes with the aluminum twin spar frame, both Japanese and even German bikes. And it's totally different. You get to a turn, you just have to think that you need to turn, and it's like if the bike falls over, you don't have to move your body as much to pull it down. Like with my Ducati, I have to hang out and just pull it down. Japanese, they just come down with you, and eventually you just have to push them up when you're done with the turn. It's a matter of preference. I personally don't like it. I feel unstable when I'm down. I can feel the aluminum frame flexes a lot under me. It jiggle-juggles. I feel like if I sneeze while I'm on a turn, the bike is gonna just slide away from me. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I prefer to have a bike that is stuck on the rail, although I cannot move out of the rail. But like I said, some riders, they prefer to have the very flexible frame, and there are the advantages. I see when I'm racing, a lot of times I see these guys with the Japanese bikes, they just get there, down on a turn, oh, they have a guy in front, okay, they just swap out, or they swap it in. Wow, okay, yeah, they can do that fairly easy. Good for them, not good for me. I'm more for a rigid bike. I had many people trying my motorcycle, my Ducati 848. I had people that tried it, they got back in the pits, they wanted to sell their own bike to buy a Ducati. They said, they need to buy this bike, it's great, I love it. Other people, they tried my bike, they come back after a few laps and say, how the heck do you turn with this thing? I can't stand it, I feel like it's always going straight. It's a matter of preference. There is people that likes one type of bike, people that likes a different one. I tried several bikes in my life. I tried Ducatis. I tried the Ducati Desmo 16, which, despite the scary name of this GP bike, is very simple to ride. I feel really comfortable. It has a throttle response that I love. I don't feel like having to multitask in the throttle. I can just be on a turn and open the throttle a little bit at a time, and she just gives you a little bit of time. The throttle is not snappy. And the Agosta 4000, probably the hardest bike that I've ridden instead. Although it has a rigid frame like a Ducati, the throttle response was horrible. It was like having a light switch on off. You ask a little, she gives you a snap, I couldn't do anything with it. I tried the BMW S1000RR. We go down to a steel treadly like Japanese bikes. I didn't feel comfortable, I feel unstable. The electronics, I don't know, they don't work good with me. I tried with the electronics on, and it was barely touching the throttle, and it's twitchy. I don't know, it's like I have always a different answer. I didn't feel comfortable with it. My father tried the BMW S1000RR, loved it. What are you gonna do? Different ride styles. I tried also smaller bikes, Yamaha R6, CBR 600s, Gixxer 750s. They're all aluminum frames, they're very flexible. I don't feel comfortable with it, but that's me personally. This is me, I'm not talking about you. You have to figure out by yourself what's the best bike for you. And this is really hard because when you're gonna go on the track the first time, what are you gonna do? I mean, you don't have experience. You don't have the experience to push your bike, neither the bike that you use every day on the street, to the limit, to understand which way you feel more comfortable. There is one thing that a lot of people do not understand, and it's about the power. A lot of people say, oh, if you go on the track, you need a leader bike. No, it's not that you need a liter bike. If you like to go with a liter bike, go with it. But you know what? 90% of the times, actually you can say 95% of the times here in the US, it's not going to make any difference at all. Because the power that those bikes they can develop, you cannot use on most of the racetracks that there are here in the US. When you watch the World SuperBike or MotoGP, they have racetracks that they are specially selected and they're built with some specific characteristics, there are some requirements, one of which is that at least on 50 to 60% of the track, the riders, they need to be able to hold the throttle fully open. Again, 50 to 60% full throttle lap. There are maybe 30 racetracks all over the world that they reach this kind of requirements. When you're here in the US, most of the tracks, you're not gonna make it. You're gonna have racetracks where actually smaller bikes, they're gonna beat big time the bigger bikes. Why? Reason is simple. You can have 200 horsepower as well as having 80 horsepower of a bike. When you go down on a turn, you have this much rubber touching the ground. You can use only 20, maybe 30 horsepower. You're not going to be able to do more. Okay, we can play again on the differences between the frames. If you have a rigid frame doesn't flex, so it pushes down on the tires more. If you have a tire that flexes a lot, that is soft, it might give you a little bit more surface, and that's why you can open the throttle a little more. And in fact, me with my Ducati, I go really faster pretty much than everybody on the corners, but really that's just on the corners, and it's, you know, a matter of how much power you can handle during the corner. It doesn't matter if you have 200 horsepower or if you have 80. It depends upon the tires, and you know, the tires, that's what they can do, 20, maybe 30 horsepower. I mean, all the bikes that I tried, when I'm down on a corner, I'm just touching the throttle. Even on my bike, on my Ducati, I feel I can tell that I'm going faster because I see that I reach everybody during the corners, but it's not that I'm wanging the throttle during the corner. So it becomes actually a disadvantage to have a bigger motor. If you have a bigger motor, it's heavier. You go down on a corner, the tire has to hold more weight than a smaller bike, so it's going to end up going slower than the smaller bikes. Personally, one time I was on the track with my Ducati 848, and all of a sudden I see a dinosaur, literally a dinosaur, a BMW HP2 with the boxer engine. He passed me, even on a wheelie, slamming it down on the next corner, scraping the headers, and went on. They actually became my instructor afterwards, but the point is that that bike had only 110 horsepower, yet it was passing everybody and doing lap times that they were crazy. It was just a matter of framing. The way that the bike was framed was allowing the rider to open the throttle more than others. I've seen kids on bikes with 70 horsepower doing the same lap times as ultra experienced guys that they were riding on bikes with 160 plus horsepower. So really, horsepower, keep in mind, is not going to be the key when you go to the track. When you go to the track for the first time, whenever you decide that you want to buy a track bike, you need to get a bike that doesn't make you multitask a lot. In my case, I chose the SV650. Easy bike, not much power, forgiving, cheap to fix if you crash. That was a great learning bike. I enjoyed it a lot. The only thing that was missing was a rigid frame. When I got my Ducati 848, I felt, the frame that was so solid. I loved it. It was matching my personal ride style. Probably if you tell Valentino Rossi to ride my bike, he's going to tell you that it's a piece of shit because it's too rigid, it doesn't flex. So you will have to find out yourself what's the good bike for you, and the only answer is with the time. It's going to take you time, you're going to have to try different bikes. Once you find a bike that makes you feel more comfortable, try to stick to it for a few years, 2-3 years. You're going to learn the bike better and better, and only then you're going to realize the difference. So keep in mind, decision between 4 cylinders and 2 cylinders, that's fairly easy, and it's only a matter of getting used to opening the throttle. Changing the type of frame between a rigid steel trellis rather than a aluminum twin spar. One is flexible, the other one is not. That's something different. That depends upon how you move your body, and it's not something as easy to learn as the throttle. So that will be something that you will figure out when you will start riding harder and you will start feeling the difference between a frame and another. That will be the point where you will decide. So Finally, what is the best track bike? There is not. There is only the best track bike for a specific rider. Every rider has his own best bike. And unfortunately, I cannot answer your question. The only way that I can tell you is just try, figure out, let me know. For me, my personal preference, I love my Ducati 848. But like I said, there is people that loves it, people that hates it. Your bike, you're gonna have to figure it out. Good luck!